today is from Jacqueline Acevedo.
And she asks, my question, how can I improve my japa? Having a
today is from, sorry, there you go.
Sorry, she asks, how can I improve my japa having a job that I work a lot of hours? Basically, I have a lot of responsibilities during my day. At this moment, I only get to 3 to 4 rounds per day. Thank you.
Well, however many rounds you chant, I think that you have set aside some time that is exclusively for the chanting. I do that in consistently, and in doing that, the rule should be that everything else is turned off, so to speak, or out of reach or unavailable, and you have to try to close yourself out from the busy world and the thoughts about it and so forth for at least a particular period of time that you're going to chant. So if you're going to chant 4 rounds, maybe you're going to chant for half an hour or something like that. Then aside from your inability from what you're saying with your busy schedule to increase the number, the quantity of the chanting, you have to you shouldn't be that concerned about that, but be concerned about the quality of the chanting that you do have time for. And it's not a lot of time out of 24 hours. Let's say half an hour to chant 4 rounds. So you seem to be making time for that. Continue to do so, but do that in a way, like I said, that trains your mind to the idea that this is the time for japa and it's not time for anything else. And then you have to think before chanting that there's no other thing that I could possibly do that would be more significant and more important than this period of japa. That will help you as you enter into it, if you consistently make that kind of affirmation before chanting, to help you to avoid letting your mind stray, or assisting you in bringing it back and so forth. Krishna gives the example of the mind's flickering by comparing it to a candle. So it can be it can be blown out by different thoughts and so forth. Then you can just chant mechanically and check your watch, see if it's the time how it's going in terms of your busy schedule. So you have to avoid all of that, and it should if you really do that wholeheartedly and consistently, it should come to the point where it starts to become something that you look forward to that time. Because after all, if you can still the mind, you'll feel a lot better. And what to speak, if you can still the mind by filling the mind with Krishna Nam, in which all of his pastimes, qualities, his form, and so forth are all present. And you have to also think that that's the case. And so what could take place at this time if I chant? And you can set an alarm clock, set an alarm clock for half an hour and then just chant until the alarm goes off. And don't allow yourself to think of anything else. And then if you're, over time, you'll be successful, as I say, and you'll start to appreciate the japa, and then you'll probably find ways to increase the quantity also, because it's works wonders for your everyday life, what to speak of your spiritual prospect ultimately. So those are my suggestions. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Guru Maharaj. So the next question is from Kishore Krishna.
Haribo, Pranams, Guru Maharaj.
Good morning.
So I've often heard that scripture speaks of the fear of death as the origin of all fear. and I appreciate that idea, but I'm wondering if there's more to the picture, in that the fear of death seems to connect mostly to the sat potency of the jiva, whereas there's also the chit and the ananda potency, in the sense that the fear of death is like the bringing into question the sat potency. So would you say that like the chit potency brought into question like the fear of not knowing who one is or what reality is, and the ananda potency, like the fear of not being loved or disconnected or empty, would you say that those also would be like origins of fear?
Well, obviously we seek to exist, and we seek to know, and we seek to love, to be happy, to be joyful. And the reason we do that is because that is our nature. So we're seeking our nature. And I do think that the ephemeral nature of our material life is obviously a major issue. If we think about it, we tend not to think about it, or try not to think about it. But it's there, and it's gnawing and so forth. So I guess you can say that our existence seems threatened in material life, and that is the underlying source of angst, fear, apprehension, and so forth. Now, to extend that, I don't know if it's necessary to extend the fear itself. I mean, you could. There's a ignorance. Is not knowing is a problem. Does it make one fearful? It puts one in anxiety. And not having a love, for example, people want to know. They want to know what to do. They want to know who to do it with, so to speak. Who's their partner in life? These are, I suppose you could say, the pursuits of knowing and loving that are inherent in the self, that are pursued without an understanding of where to look for them. Are they? Is there? I would just say that fear pervades material existence, and the reason is because we don't perceive the fact that we're eternal and that we're inherently knowing and blissful. I mean, I suppose you could, extend like you do, but it kind of seems to water down the fear a little bit in comparison to the way the fear of not existing is more prominent. Do you follow me? So probably for that reason, the texts haven't made that connection, but yeah, it's there, but it's not as prominently defined or looked at as fear. You could use other adjectives to describe it that might be more accurate. But yeah, overall, not knowing produces fear, right? And knowing that you're not going to continue, that produces fear. And as far as joy goes, are people fearful for lack of joy? They're in anxiety, I suppose you could say. So those are as far as I can go with it. I mean, I don't quite, kind of see I see the clear connection between not existing, threat of not existence and fear more clearly than the lack of knowing and the lack of joy. Does that help? I'm saying, yeah, but no.
Yeah, no, that does help. I can definitely understand the visceral fear of not existing. I guess I was just thinking of it in connection to like the ontology of the jiva and its prospect and its like innate desires, and how when those are thwarted, yeah, I don't know. So
That's the problem. As material existence, it's an angst. I would refer it more as kind of an angst, and a feeling out of place, than fear. Although, because in an overarching sense, the ephemeral or temporal nature of our existence, if thought about, is could be perceived as problematic, and result in a motive driven by fear. I think. Anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts. What else?
Next question is from Dira Lalita Dasi in Brazil.
And she writes, Jaya Gurudeva Haribol. In your comment on Gita, you tell about Arciradi, the path of light that the yogi takes after leaving the body. It starts with Archi, a deva of light, and finishes with Prajapati Brahma. So the soul is moving from one deva to another. You say that there are 13 devas on this path of light, and the yogi is moving from one to another. So I was trying to imagine what is happening with the soul during this journey. Can you explain a bit more? And you say that this path is also tread by some devotees. So I was wondering if Bhishma took this path as well, as he was waiting for that special moment to leave his body.
I don't think Bhishma was waiting for that. And typically, this refers. I think that I've said something about this in my commentary on Gopal Tapani Upanishads. You might want to look at that, with regards to the Sushumna chakra, the artery, if you will, to which the soul is thought to exit through the top of the head, and so forth, and that in relation to Vrindavan and the Jamuna and so forth, and given a very devotional and bhakti kind of rasic perspective on that, I would recommend that you look there. I'm sorry, I can't give you the verse exactly to look up. I can't recall it, but I say that because the reference from the Gita, it pertains more to a mystic yoga perspective and pursuit. If you die at any time remembering Krishna, you're in a better position. Anytime, anywhere, is the idea. Such as the power and the virtue of bhakti and so forth. As far as the experience, I mean, I don't quite know what you're asking, but I mean, the self travels through different experiences, different dimensions, even in this life, different bodies, and from childhood to youth, or youth to old age, and so on and so forth. So while the external environment can change, and a different window or theater a different picture, if you will, in the theater of consciousness. We can come into and then go into another. So the experience is, is other dimensional than the ones that you experience in everyday waking life, maybe more akin to experiences in the dreaming state, where you're involved with mind stuff and there are more possibilities and so on and so forth, subtle realms of experience. So it's going from grosser to subtler realms of experience and passing out. And so the whole of the cosmos is described like that in books, for example, like Vraja-vasis, different, and in the Bhagavatam itself, of course, with different levels or layers of from gross to subtle, more subtle, up to Brahmalok. Brahmalok represents like a loka, a planet, if you will, of intelligence. It may be a little hard to wrap your head around what that means, because of our experience of intelligence doesn't correspond with a realm per se. But such is the realm of Brahma. Therefore, he is described as having more heads than one, thoughtful. But from in a hierarchy within our own microcosm of a psychophysiological composite, we have sense objects on the outside, the senses which contact them. We have the mind, and we're going more subtle from senses to mind, and mind to intellect. And as the Gita says, and beyond that, again, categorically different from that hierarchy is the self. So anyway, the travel is talking about going through subtler and subtler layers of material conditioning. And then from it's thought that from Brahmaloka, in that route, one goes to the distance, typically as Brahma does, at his death, after a long time. So those are some thoughts on that. But it's it's kind of technically interesting and so forth. But there are so many statements in the Gita itself, and what's big of another text as to the efficacy of remembering Krishna. I mean, the Gita says, whatever you think of the time of death, that's where you go. It's a more overarching and larger, kind of explanation. There's of course Kram Mukti. Kram Mukti means that you go step by step by step by step by step, rather than just all at once, so to speak. And the devotional perspective kind of lays more emphasis on yes, you may have to take other lives, but aside from taking other lives in this world, on earth, let us say, to take birth in Krishna Lila and go there. We see Kram Mukti in another sense within Bhakti in Bhagavatamrita, where Gopakumar is going through. So one level after another, after another, after another. But that's largely for explaining the pros and the cons, if you will, looking at those desirable realms in many senses in comparison to his ultimate destination, which, as I say, can be achieved without worrying about whether you're dying during the winter or the summer or the night or the day, and so on and so forth. So I haven't put a lot of thought into it, and it's not my experience. So, but I would again refer you to Gopal Tapani Upanishad. I've written there a little bit of similar analysis, if you will, of a yogic way of leaving the body and attaining mukti, and the devotee's way. Gopakumar, to go back to Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he just fell in the Jamuna, running after, looking for Krishna. And the Jamuna is or the Vrindavan is like the body of Krishna in a sacred geographical manifestation, and the Jamuna is like the Susumna, like the central nervous system coming up the spine and out. And so the yogis, they try to move through that, and he just jumped in the Jamuna and went there, something like that. I've explained it more poetically, more beautifully, but I would refer you to that book. Thank you for the question. What else?
There's a follow-up from Sajan to this.
Dandavats Maharaj. I remember reading, like, probably in the late 70s in one of Srila Prabhupada's books, that when a jiva kind of leaves the spiritual sky, so to speak, or the Brahmajyoti, we could say, his first or her first birth is as a Brahma on the planet of Brahma or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We're speaking about, right? And so, and it's also the planet of Lord Brahma, the realm of creating, is sometimes equated with the causal body of each living being, like that, causal body. But if that doesn't seem true, I would love to know that. Does it seem true?
Does what seem true again? Can you say it once more?
That the whole conception of the planet of Brahma, the planet where creation takes place, can be kind of synonymously equated with the causal body of every human being, at least, if not all sentient beings everywhere, like that.
Oh, I think what you're referring to is that the composite of the jivas first appears as Brahma before being differentiated into many according to their karma and so forth. So the samasti jiva, it's called. So Brahma represents at the dawn of creation that the samasti, the composite of all the jivas. And then as the work of creation, if you will, proceeds, then all the individual jivas are manifest in relation to their karma. They take their places based on the previous karma before they had entered into susupti. When they're coming out of susupti, or the sleep of, if you will, the dream of Vishnu, then they appear as samasti jiva, a composite, a macrocosm of the jivas. And that is one form of Brahma, Hiranyagarbha. That's kind of your question, right?
Yes. And also related directly with that is that also in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the story is given how Lord Brahma, there was something where he had to kind of like let go of like his impurity or something. There was like residual impurity that he released. He totally let go of at some point after his appearing from the navel of Vishnu or something like that. I'm doing the best I can to remember from so far back, but in any case, it is also said, this is how it correlates, is that it's said that the causal body of all of us is kind of, sometimes it could be referred to as the collective unconscious by the psychologists, but it's not really, it's kind of like not really an accurate term. It itself is not unconscious, but there are things which we as consciousness are not conscious of within the causal body. And so they can remain like throughout one's life, you know, things, incidents which occurred in childhood or maybe in the mother's womb, etc., or maybe from previously before that. Anyway, so this time there seems to be some kind of an indication in both the story in the Bhagavatam and the its correlation to our own, all of our direct experiences, just from a psychological perspective, purely practical, that there's some kind of a catharsis taking place or being portrayed, you know, in the life of Brahma, we could say. Do you have anything particularly you might want to speak about that catharsis?
No, but it sounds accurate. It's a good description.
Okay.
Nothing comes to mind particularly. So yeah, we'll follow the example of Brahma. Let me, excuse me, forgive me, but I was, I did find a section in the Gopal Tapani that I was referring to previously. I thought I'd read it to you all, but I think your insights are good. Sajjan, thank you for them.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. I was referring to the verse in the commentary I'm writing. In this verse, the great daughter of the sun, Brihat Bhavani, tell us something more about the word swaha in the Gopal mantra, the last word of the mantra, previously identified with sacrifice and yogamaya, in terms of its illuminating the path to liberation and love of Krishna. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10:58-20, Krishna's wife, Kalindi, states that she is the daughter of the sun, Aham Devasya Savitur Nurhita. This same Kalindi is the goddess of the sacred river, Jamuna. Jamuna is identified microcosmically and macrocosmically with the Susumna Nadi, the mystic pathway to liberation, which is the question from the Gita. Microcosmically, the Susumna Nadi appears in the subtle body as the channel from the heart to the top of the head through which successful yogis travel when leaving their bodies in the course of attaining liberation. Macrocosmically, the Susumna is the path of light, passing through the sun that represents the yogic pathway to liberation on leaving the material body. Jamuna Devi thus illumines the yogic path to liberation, while the daughter of the sun lights the path to the world beyond the material sky in her form as the Susumna Nadi. She is also present in Krishna's abode, manifest here on earth, Bhoma Vrindavan, earthly Vrindavan. As we shall see later in Gopal Tapani, this abode is as much or more about the possibilities of liberated life as it is a potent place from which to perform spiritual practice with a view to attaining liberation, of course, devotional liberation. It is the land of Leela that lies beyond the microcosmic and macrocosmic sense of existence, even while appearing within the world of mind and senses. In that sacred mystical terrain, Dham, Jamuna Devi flows freely in love of Krishna, and Krishna's devotees who religiously bathe in her water float blissfully, if not effortlessly, on her devotional current into the heart of liberated life. She is also known by the name Tapati or Tapani, and thus she too sheds light. Tapani means to shed light on Gopal Krishna, as does this Upanishad. After accepting the sannyasa order, which is considered synonymous with liberation, Sri Krishna Chaitanya offered the following prayer to the Jamuna as he desired to enter Vrindavan. I'll read the English. O daughter of the sun, although you have appeared in the form of water, you are most dear to the son of Nanda, who is the spiritual sun. You dispel the sins of all sinners. Please purify this material body. It goes on from there, but again, I'll refer to the example of Gopakumar, who had the vision of Krishna and he disappeared. He chased after him. He fell into the Jamuna, and the Jamuna took him all the way to Goloka. So glad I could find that. Let's continue then with the questions.
So sorry, yes, there was a PS to that last question by dear Lalita Dasi. She just asked at the end, PS, when will you be back to Brazil?
Next year.
There was also a follow-up thought from Kishore to his question. He says that my experience has been that bhakti does away with fear most comprehensively by the feeling of love, loving Krishna and feeling loved by Krishna, not simply by feeling eternal, although that is included in the experience. So that was part of the train of thought. In that, the devotee at the feet of Krishna is most fearless because he feels cared for by his friend.
Abai Charanaravinda Kijai.
Jai.
Fearless at the feet of Krishna. Yes, love of Krishna will, I see your point, will certainly do away with all fear and anxiety. Fear that I may not be loved, that I may not love. Yes, that will be answered and resolved at the feet of Krishna. Thank you for that. What else?
So the next question's from Anadi Krishna in Poland.
He says, Dear Guru Maharaj, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the commentary to the 8th verse of the 4th chapter, Paritranaya Sadhunam, you write about Krishna killing the demons. And quote, thus at the moment of death, he sees Krishna as the greatest object of affection. His liberation is not directly a result of being killed by Krishna, but rather a result of his newfound love for him, unquote. My question is, why do most demons attain sayujya-mukti when at the time of death, love for Krishna awakens in them? Thank you.
Well, they have enough love of Krishna to get them to sayujya-mukti, because you can't get there without it, is the idea. Therefore, they're, this verse and its explanation, which is drawn largely from Govinda Bhashya of Balali Vijibhushan, his commentary on Vedanta Sutra, speaks positively. There are many statements that speak negatively for the sake of comparison about sayujya-mukti, the pursuit of it, the desire for it, and so forth, in comparison to the desire for prema, the pursuit of it. And that's more readily what we hear. But that doesn't mean to say that sayujya-mukti is something bad, although we say it's terrible, because in there's no prema. But it is a form of liberation. It's a form of mukti. Not everything about the self is revealed there, but it's freed from material existence. But that's it, as I say, it can't get there without some appreciation for Krishna. So those jnanis who do a little bhakti to attain sayujya, they will be successful. Those that don't, the Bhagavatam explains, and vilify Krishna, for example, by way of teaching that his form is material and so on and so forth, as some do, then they won't attain their ideal of merging with Brahman. So a little bhakti, they get a little bhakti, they get appreciation of Krishna, and then he He keeps them at a little bit of a distance. He takes them out of the suffering, but keeps a little distance from them. That can change, though. And so there are examples of liberated souls by Krishna's grace, moving on, if you will, from sayujya to Vaikuntha. What else?
The next question's from Prema Mantra.
And he says, Dandavat Pranam Gurudev. My question is as follows. I have heard some statements from prominent acharyas, both from this generation and the previous one, regarding the sadhaka's journey until reaching prema bhakti. Two of these statements are the following. One, before the sadhaka attains pure love for Krishna, he or she must take birth again and relive kind of the same pastimes together with the previous acharyas, generation after generation, until reaching Mahaprabhu and entering the Nitya Leela. And two, another acharya stated, if we do not attain prema bhakti in this lifetime, we will have to go through the 8,400,000 species of life all over again before getting a new opportunity. These were not isolated statements, but were repeated quite often. I noticed that some people who hear these things become confused, others feel inspired, and others become discouraged, taking these statements as absolute truth. From what I read and hear from you, Gurudev, my personal conviction is somewhat different. So my question is, could these statements simply be ways for preachers to encourage devotees in general to take their practice more seriously? And if that's the case, how could I help those who are fully convinced by that particular acharya's message, but whose conviction is leading them into a state of paranoia or fantasy? Thank you, and sorry for being so long-winded.
Well, I've never heard such ideas in half a century of, more than half a century of participating in Gaudiya Vaishnavism and studying the texts and hearing from various acharyas and so forth. So I don't know where those ideas come from. And so that's the first thing that comes to mind. They're not, there's no scriptural support for them. And so that brings them into question. Now, if someone is basing their life on those statements, or they are a motivating factor in their lives that they're taking, and they're taking them very seriously, which you seem to know some people that are doing that, and it's not working for them, just producing anxiety rather than intensifying their practice, then that should be pointed out to them. The idea that some acharya may have said something along those lines that, as I say, is not supportable by the scripture, is reason to think that perhaps, as you say, they've said such things just to motivate the disciples. But if the disciples over time, or the next generation, whatever may be the case, are not being motivated by them, but they're having a counterproductive effect, well, then you have to look at the results, right? You have to look at the results. The acharya doesn't want you to, wants you to practice, and not to become so neurotic that you lose hope and so forth. Aside from that, what I would say is that that it's said in detail by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Madhurya Kadambini that the jiva will take birth in the Prakat Leela after attaining prema in the Prakat Leela, and then from there will, in pursuit of the prema of Braj, develop further intensity that qualifies them to then enter from the Prakat Leela to the Aprakat Leela. Now, this is very, very overtly described by him there in that book, Madhurya Kadambini. It's referred to more broadly and more generally in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which Vishwanath Thakur is obviously following. But the principle that's being described is explained by Rupa Goswami. And the principle is that upon attaining bhava, this bhava has to intensify in order to turn into prema and bhakti rasa, rasananda. And that's the principle, which means even upon attaining bhava, it will take some time. And so then to concretize that, some will say, well, let's take birth in the Prakat Leela, for example, or you take birth in Mahaprabhu's Leela first. And there may be different ways that they try to concretize that. But this is the essential principle. The condensation of that bhav is what prema constitutes. And it takes some time, even though bhav is liberation. From there to attain prema is takes some time. Therefore, there are three stages that are described. There's sadhana, there's bhakti, there's bhava bhakti, and there's prema bhakti. So we have to look at the principle. Now, the acharyas may speak in different ways to concretize that principle and and play it out and so forth. And they may take some license to do that with a view to encourage the disciples, and at the same encourage them, and at the same time give them some free them from false hopes, false expectations. Like I many times said, I've often been asked, is it possible, Maharaj, that you could attain prema in one lifetime? And I reply, in one lifetime, yeah. Which one is the question? So it's the one in which you stop asking the question. Like Mahaprabhu says, Mama janmani janmanishvare bhavatad bhakti ahoita kitvaye. I've attained ruchi, a taste for bhakti, and it's not an issue for me anymore in that lifetime. So it's good to and it can be useful to advise the disciple who's a little more grounded in the practice. It's not going anywhere, but it may take a little time, a little longer than maybe you thought when you first joined. And then they're in a position to be able to digest that, if you will. Patience is a virtue, after all. So it's useful. It can be useful to emphasize that. Like it can be useful in the beginning to say, yes, just you can go in this lifetime, no problem. But then probably would say things like that, and it's not untrue necessarily. But then if you want to step back, you think, well, maybe it could take a couple lifetimes, maybe a few more, maybe a yuga, So I think you could talk to such devotees and help them by saying there's a principle here. And to concretize the principle, different acharyas have given different examples, different ways of speaking about it. Now, the one way that I mentioned that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has emphasized is taking birth in the Prakat Leela. And that's has pretty much become like, that has to happen. That's the Siddhanta, that's the teaching. But I'm relativizing that by saying that's a way of concretizing that. I don't disagree with it, and there's a lot of sense to that. But I give you an example to the contrary, which shows that this is a principle, but how it plays out, it does not necessarily have to be in this particular way. Even this taking birth in the Prakat Leela. What is the example? Gopakumar and Brihad Bhagavatamrita. What a prominent example. He did not take birth in the Prakat Leela. He was living in Vrindavan, he was practicing and so forth, but Krishna wasn't there manifesting his Leelas at that time. He experienced Krishna through meditation and chanting the name in the Dham. And then as I said, he jumped into the Jamuna and they went to Goloka. So he didn't pass through the Prakat Lila. He didn't have to take birth in the Prakat Lila. So there's a prominent example that even this point, this concretizing of the idea that bhakti has to intensify, the idea of being taking birth in the Prakat Lila means you have association with Nityasiddhas and so on and so forth, and features of the developmental features of praying from Sneha, Man, Pranay, Rag, Anurag, Bhav, Mahabhav. It can be done practically only in the association of those who have that. There's a good, I've given an example of that before, of how in the sports world, they have persons who play in the college league and the best of them get drafted into the professional leagues. The professional league moves faster, so they have to just kind of be thrown out into the practice field with the pros and pick up the speed, right? They can't learn it on the bench. They can't learn it by reading the playbook and so forth. But somebody could. And some of them go right from the college right to the professional field and become, superstars. It does happen, right? So even in that example, there are exceptions, so to speak. So I think that you have to emphasize the principle. And I can't remember the verse, but it's there in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And then from there, different acharyas may talk about it in different ways to make the point. So maybe that will help you to alleviate those devotees from their depression from such ideas and other things that you mentioned that they're suffering from. But I never heard those particular concretizing of this principle, if you will. So it's a little strange, actually, but I take your word for it. That some reputable persons, sadhus, have employed those examples. Hope that helps.
The next question is from Vijay Kumar.
Changa Pranams. Gurudev, we are the Bhaktivinoda Parivar. He spoke that the Bhagavad Gita speaks of Radha, although it never mentions her name. How does he relate us to our goal of Radha-dasyam, worshiping the one Krishna worships? As you have spoken many, many years ago, we worship the one that Krishna worships.
Oh, what's your question?
You're muted, Vijay Kumar.
I didn't quite get a question out of it.
How does he relate us to our goal of Radha-dasyam?
How does Bhaktivinoda relate us to it?
Yes, Bhaktivinoda Thakura relate us to the goal of Radha-dasyam, worshiping the one Krishna worships. There's been a lot of classes about Radha-dasyam. I mean, about Radha and how she's the sole goal. And my question is, being the Bhaktivinoda Parivar, he relates us to Radha, but where does he show us that?
Okay. Well, I think that you've probably been listening to some devotees at the Badger retreat recently. And
yes.
They would be the type that would really emphasize Radha-dasyam, Radha-dasyam, Radha-dasyam.
Yeah, the whole time.
Not a bad thing, but I think it can be a little overdone.
Yeah,
and I'm familiar with that group. I would say to you this, that Radha-dasyam is the highest ideal, in one sense, of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. I say in one sense because all the ideals are the highest for the different individuals whose swabhav corresponds with any of the ideals of Braj that Mahaprabhu came to give. But Radha-dasyam is another way of saying Bavulasrati or Manjari Bhav, to be a handmaiden of Radha, and so forth. That's what they're talking about when they say Radha-dasyam. The ideal is to be a handmaiden of Radha. And this you will experience because no one can experience Bhakti Rasa more than Radha.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And if you want to come as close to that as possible, well, you have two options. One was you could aspire to become a gopi like Radha and have a romantic relationship with Krishna, but then you'd be a competitor of Radha.
Right.
Or you could just decide to assist Radha in her pursuit of love of Krishna. And by becoming so identified with Radha, you start to experience her experiences.
Right.
So that's the idea. So Mahaprabhu came to taste the bhav of Radha, and to get as close to that as possible, this is the idea of Radha-dasyam, Manjari Bhav. So we all say this is the highest ideal of Gaudiya Vaishnavasm, and so on and so forth. And how do you attain that? Well, there's all kinds of ways people could talk about that, but I can tell you this: that if you follow the practices very early on in my devotional life, I read that Prabhupada said that Raganuga Bhakti is when you start to like, going to the Mangal Arti, and when you look forward to sitting down for japa and so forth. And then rather than thinking I like it, when I actually like it. I'm waking up with wow, it's time for this, and dreaming about it at night and so forth. Then I could understand that I'm following Raganuga Bhakti without knowing so many details about it that I know now, and ways of talking about it and writing about it theologically and philosophically, and so on and so forth. So the simplicity of Prabhupada's explanation was very actually profound. And if you don't have the experience, but you get all this information, and you're talking about Manjari Bhav, Radha-dasyam, it becomes a little bit of a problem.
I was experiencing that.
Yeah, well, okay. So it becomes a little bit dogmatic, and
they leave out the part of the parivar, what Bhaktivinoda actually gave, and they lose.
Bhaktivinoda also pursued that himself, obviously, but there's more to the parivar than Manjari Bhav. Let's put it like that.
Right.
And to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So at any rate, that's basically the idea, and the pursuit of that ideal is clearly discussed by Bhaktivinoda, by Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta, and Saraswati Thakura, and so forth. So that's my response. I appreciate your concerns, and I can understand.
Thank you for your clarifications. I greatly appreciate it, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much for your mercy.
Recent experience. Yeah. What else? Another question?
The next question's from Vraja-Hari.
And he's asking, is there a connection between the Leela, where the gopis and Krishna meet in Kuruksetra, and the Ratha Yatra? How are they connected?
Who's asking?
Vraja-Hari, Prabhu.
Yeah, there's a deep connection there. This is all described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became absorbed in a kirtan in Ratha Yatra, then he was transported to that. He began some verses from there are cited, Mayi Bhakti Bhutanam Amritapaya Gopate, and so forth. The words of Krishna and the corresponding response from the gopis. So yes, and the Ratha Yatra is thought to be taking Krishna from Dwarka to Vrindavan, to the Gundicha temple, or you can say to Kuruksetra. But what happened to Kuruksetra was that while the invitation was sent out widely, it included the Vraja-vasis who came in their covered wagons and so forth to the big festival and came to the gate and knocked on the door, and they were asked, "Do you have a ticket?" No, but I want to see my son. And your son is the son of your son. It's the son of Devaki, and he's addressed as Vasudeva, and so on and so forth. Word leaked back. Some lady at the gate, she says she's your mother. Krishna then let her in, and then all the Vraja-vasis came, of course, and there's a nice description of Krishna speaking with Yashoda and Ananda, and Devaki admitting the motherhood of Yashoda exceeds my motherhood, and so forth. Very beautiful. And then Balaram notices the gopis at a distance, and then he gets up and moves Mother Yashoda and so forth, so Krishna can meet with the gopis. And then the gopis question Krishna about his love, and he explains to them that his heart is always in Vrindavan. It's never left. He's always with them, and so forth. And so Kuruksetra kind of the meeting in Kuruksetra is a deep remembrance of and speaking of the virtues of Braj Bhakti. An interesting point there that Sanatana Goswami makes in that section of the Bhagavatam, I think it's the 82nd or 84th chapter of the 10th canto. He says, when the gopis speak, one may wonder why the gopas didn't speak, or why didn't Krishna say anything about the gopas? And he says, because the gopis are speaking on their behalf, and on behalf of all the rasas of Braj. While they're speaking about their own bhav, they're simultaneously speaking about the dasya, the sakya, the vatsalya of Braj, and they're representing how everybody feels there. And it universalizes in a way, in terms of the Braj universe, what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is all about, that so much comes out in the Ratha Yatra. I mean, the inner reason for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's descent, to taste the bhav of Radha and so forth, it really comes out, comes front and center, if you will, in the Ratha Yatra Leela, these pastimes, where again he's transported through his kirtan to some of these verses, and there we find that it's not just about Gopi Bhav, but it represents the whole of the Braj. It's not, it gives a very beautiful explanation like this. I had never seen that before. I recently came across that. So very, 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 very beautiful. But yes, Ratha Yatra is about the meeting of Krishna with the inhabitants of Vrindavan in Kuruksetra, and how Kuruksetra and Dwarka fall short, and this is only the extolling then the virtues of Braj. The virtues of Braj are described. It's a big topic. I hope to speak a little bit about it in the next week in our sessions in Europe, because it corresponds with that time, and I was graciously invited to attend the ISKCON Polish Ratha Yatra. So looking forward to that. So thank you for your question and all your questions, and I hope to be with you again soon. We'll run out of time. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Jai. Srila Guru Maharaj ki jai. And so we just have an announcement before we say goodbye. Like Guru Maharaj was mentioning, he's coming to Europe this week. He's coming to Poland. And so there won't be a Swami Call next week and the week after. So I think we'll return on the 20th of July, will be the next Swami Call. But between that time, thankfully, there'll be many classes. And so we'll try to stream those, and so they'll be on YouTube, and of course Zoom as well. We'll put the details on Facebook and so on in the news and in the newsletter. And so yeah, keep up to date there, and we'll let you know when the classes are going on and so on. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks. Hare Krishna. Oh, I just see in the chat for it. I was just about to hang up, but I see Krishna Kanai was asking where the Polish Ratha Yatra will be, and so yeah, on the 5th in Wrocław, and so we'll let you know. So Okay.
Please, Vijay Kumar, we need the email to be added to the newsletter.
Vijay Kumar, I think you're in the WhatsApp group in the book club, aren't you? So if you put your email address maybe in there, and we can pass it on to, I think Sadhvi takes care of the newsletter, and she can add you.